red dot found his heart before the wind found his hair. Lee Ji-woo stepped out onto the helipad. The night peeled back to glass and noise. The city lay below like a circuit board, every window a bead of light, and for a moment he mistook the tightness in his chest for altitude. Then, Yoon So-ah moved. No warning, no words, just a bodyguard's reflex older than thought. He hit Ji-woo hard enough to bruise a rib, and the shot took the air where Ji-woo had been. The hiss of a suppressed round vanished into the rotor wash of a chopper that wasn't there. So-ah grunted, not from pain but from the calculation of it. His shoulder caught the bullet. His coat ripped. Two small things spilled from the tear and skittered across the painted H, a weathered brass compass, etched with a sigil like a star trying to be a knot. And half of a hand-drawn map, crease-worn and stained the color of tea. Go, So-ah breathed. Ji-woo went because So-ah had taught him that obedience is the most expensive luxury, and tonight they could afford it. A door blew open. Footsteps came fast. The red dot searched again and found only empty air and the shadow of a man already running. They reached the stairwell. Alarms did not sound. Someone had turned them off. On the fourth landing, So-ah's knees forgot him for a second, and Ji-woo remembered how to be useful. They traded weight without speaking. The compass cut a circle of cold against Ji-woo's palm, as if reminding him that some metal remembers more than people do. By the time the elevator camera blinked awake, they were gone. In the hospital corridor, lights hummed and tried to be brave. A nurse asked questions that made no sense to a night like this. Ji-woo watched doors close on the man who had made sure he lived long enough to be afraid. The corridor smelled of antiseptic and burnt coffee, and the kind of patience that takes years off a person's life 1 hour at a time. Yoon So-ah arrived like a decision fast. Straight-backed, hair tied like a line drawn with a ruler. She didn't look at Ji-woo first. She looked at the floor for blood, at the nurse's hands for tremor, at the clock for lies. When she did look at him, he saw So-ah's habit of measuring a room in the angle of a daughter's jaw. "What happened?" she asked. "A meeting turned into a geometry problem," he said, then winced at his own stupidity. "A shot. He pushed me." It took him. The doors opened for them. Machines spoke in soft loops. So-ah looked smaller against the bed, but his eyes were unbroken glass. He lifted his uninjured hand. Ji-woo stepped forward. The hand closed around Ji-woo's wrist and pulled him closer until the old soldier could put the compass in the heir's palm again, the metal warm now, as if it had been held by a fever. "Keep it moving," So-ah rasped. His gaze flicked to So-ah like a comma, not a period. She nodded once, already translating the grammar of his silence. Out in the corridor again, the elevator took too long. So-ah stared at the compass like it might blink. "That's not his," she said. "It was," Ji-woo answered, and the was felt like a sentence. "My father doesn't carry heirlooms," she said. "He carries tools." "It opens something," Ji-woo said. He didn't mean to say it out loud, but the words had been waiting near his teeth for years. Back at the family study, the heir remembered stacks of unsaid things. The room was old wood and leather, and the photograph of a man whose approval Ji-woo had spent a decade miscounting. He pulled a box from a shelf only a child would have thought to search, because a child had. Inside lay a riddle he had pretended to outgrow. When night forgets the moon, turn the north to where the shadow points. Compass before ring, ring before star. The door won't open until it knows which hand you are. So-ah leaned in. The sigil etched under the compass matched the one burned into the corner of the paper like a watermark. On the torn edge of the map, her fingers found something only a person raised by a bodyguard would notice: tiny marks in a shorthand So-ah had used when he didn't trust radios. Buckshan rooftops. A teahouse attic, a substation no longer on city maps. "You knew," she said quietly. "I knew a story," he said. "I didn't know it had coordinates." Her mouth made a line that could have been anger in another life. "You're not going without me." "The optics," he started. "Optics don't dodge bullets," she said, already shrugging into a jacket that had pockets in the right places. "I do." He looked at her and saw the truth of it, not the romance. He nodded because he understood that tonight competence was the only beautiful thing anyone could afford. Bookshan tilted its roofs at the sky as if eavesdropping on the moon. The tea house had been old before their parents learned to lie well, and its attic breathed dust in a language that made Jiwoo's throat itch. They moved like people who had paid attention during childhood, soft on the stairs, palms against walls to feel for hollow. So-ah found the panel not by sight but by draft. She slid her fingers along a beam where the air felt cooler, and something gave under her hand with the sound of a secret getting tired. The compartment was small and mean. Inside was a wooden box with a ring-sized hollow and a shallow cup that made no sense until Jiwoo placed his signet ring into the compass bezel, and the two became one shape. "Compass before ring," he said. "Then star," So-ah murmured, pointing to a tiny inlay on the box lid that matched the sigil. He turned the fused ring and compass a quarter turn clockwise and felt the box accept a password he hadn't known how to say. It unlocked with a sigh like an old man lowering himself into a chair. Inside, a strip of microfilm coiled like a cautionary tale, a thin card with coordinates typed in a font that didn't try to impress anyone, and a handwritten warning in a hurried hand he recognized from notes on his childhood lunch napkins. "Trust no shield with two faces." "What does that mean?" Jiwoo asked. "It means your uncle's head of security works for your uncle," So-ah said. "Not for you." They didn't have time to argue with the obvious. The attic shifted its weight. Outside, feet found their way to the wrong place on purpose. So-ah peered through a slat and saw men with the patience of professionals checking sightlines that had been drawn during daylight. "We're late," she said. "We're alive," he said. She slung the microfilm into an inner pocket and pressed the compass back into his hand, as if to remind both of them who had brought them here. "Rooftops," she said. "You're wearing the wrong shoes." "I'm wearing the only shoes I own," he said. And then she took his hand and made a better truth of it. They moved across tiled roofs because someone had taught So-ah to read a city skin deep, and someone had taught Jiwoo to follow a person who knew how not to die. They leapt a gap that would have broken a different story. Jiwoo's foot slipped just enough to make him see every headline he would never get to write. So-ah caught his wrist with her whole life and didn't let go. "Don't look down," she said. He did anyway, and saw the past waiting with its mouth open. He looked up and saw her instead. It changed the math. They dropped into alley dark, moved under a ladder that had forgotten it was supposed to help, and found the abandoned substation half hidden by ivy and disinterest. The door had been forced recently by someone who knew where you could hurt old metal without making it complain. Inside smelled like dust and the echo of current. Their phones lost their nerve. Jiwoo's breath fogged the beam of So-ah's small light. "The map says there's a crawl space under the far platform," she said. "If something's here, it'll be there." Their footsteps learned humility. The floor had opinions. Halfway across the room, a tile ticked under Jiwoo's heel. So-ah's hand was on his collar before the thought finished forming. She yanked him back so hard his bones wrote her name on their gratitude. A pressure plate depressed where he should have been. Something somewhere clicked in delight. Ropes somewhere else snapped their boredom and swung metal teeth through air that had been safe a moment earlier. The trap finished moving and waited to be needed again. On the far wall, someone had scratched a message with something sharper than a fingernail and duller than fate. The letters were narrow, dug deep enough to last through a generation of negligence. "Kang wants the ledger." So-ah lifted her light. Another line appeared at an angle, fainter, as if carved with the last of a hand's strength. "Not a book. A drive." Jiwoo felt the compass heat against his palm, where there was no heat to be had. The room exhaled a draft that didn't belong to weather. He looked at So-ah, and saw anger trying hard to be focused. "Your uncle," she said. "My father," he said. And it wasn't an answer so much as a debt calling in a favor. The light found a hatch half hidden under flaking paint. So-ah crouched, tested the edges, listened for the kind of silence that means trouble. The hatch gave a centimeter. Something below it ticked again. A polite metronome announcing that time was not on their side. Footsteps gathered at the entrance. Voices disagreed in whispers. A flashlight painted the air, and then left as if reconsidering its life choices. So-ah looked at Ji-woo, and then at the hatch, and then at the compass and said, very quietly, "On 3. 1, he whispered. 2, she said. The tick became a talk. They didn't say 3. They moved. Rain arrived like a witness that didn't want to testify. They dropped through the hatch into a shallow crawlspace that smelled of copper and neglect, then slid along the narrow gut of the old substation until a grate opened into a service alley. So-ah went first, shoulders twisting, palms steady. Ji-woo followed with the compass pressed flat in his hand as if it could quiet his heartbeat. When they came up, the alley was a wet corridor of brick and neon bleed. Somewhere behind them, a door opened to the wrong people. "Library," So-ah said. "Microfilm first. Then we decide if we run or point a camera at the sky." The National Library's old wing wore rain like a shawl. They moved through a side entrance where a security guard with a crossword looked up, took in wet hair and purposeful faces, and decided not to matter. Down 2 levels, the microfilm room hummed with machines that remember how to whisper. So-ah slid the reel they'd found at the teahouse into the reader with hands that were sure even when the world wasn't. Grainy frames filled the screen. Columns, dates, initials. A ledger of routes and numbers that did not want to be numbers. Bribe currents running under the city like second rivers. In the margin, someone had embedded a cipher-mined stars arranged like a child's bedtime sky. "Not a map," Ji-woo said, leaning close. "A ceiling." So-ah adjusted focus until the constellation template snapped into sense. "Museum," she murmured. "Your family wing." The domed gallery with the inlaid sky on the floor. He remembered being small enough to think the dome could fall and catch him. He remembered his father's hand on his shoulder. Weight and warmth. He remembered a plaque about the founder that said less than the old man deserved. A soft patter turned to steady rain against the basement windows. The room seemed farther from the surface than it had a minute ago. Ji-woo watched the numbers and saw names. He didn't notice his sleeve bleeding until the drop hit the reader's glass like a punctuation mark. "Sit," So-ah said, already moving. She pulled open a narrow drawer, found a plastic box of bandages and a roll of gauze meant for paper cuts, not bullet grazes. She tore the cotton with her teeth and met his eyes as if to apologize for the improvisation, and then didn't, because apologies would slow her hands. "It's nothing," he lied. "It's a lot when you ignore it," she said. Her fingers were warm, precise. She cleaned the line where the rooftop had taken its cut, and the crawlspace had salted it with dust. He watched the way she worked. Minimal motion. Maximum effect. Her hair had loosened. A single wet strand clung to her cheekbone like a parenthesis around a thought she hadn't said. "Thank you," he murmured. "Don't thank me yet," she said, securing the gauze with a strip of tape. "You still owe me a museum heist." He almost smiled. The machine clicked to a frame that wasn't like the others. A tiny inset diagram of the museum vault mechanism. Ring bezel. Compass lip. Star alignment. His father's handwriting in the margin, more intimate than any letter, just a single, slanted line. "If you're reading this, it wasn't an accident." The room's quiet changed shape. He saw it then. The way the ledger wasn't just a record but a weapon. Expose it and the board would turn. Hide it and Kang would rule until the city forgot how to say no. Footsteps entered their quiet like a wrong note. Too heavy for students, too light for guards. So-ah's head ticked. She pinched the reel free and slid it into her pocket. The door opened and agreed with itself about how to be a door. Two men came in, pretending to be no one. Their jackets had the kind of bulges that old rooms don't like. A third waited in the corridor, like a comma, waiting to become a period. Library closes in 10, the first man said. Not because it did, but because he wanted a sentence to stand on. Then you have 9 to leave. So-ah said, and lifted a book cart with a push that looked like a shrug and wasn't. The first man moved. So-ah rolled the cart into his shin, pivoted, and sent him into a shelf with a sound that made the microfiche tremble. Ji-woo's body remembered lessons he had filed under privileged things I hate. He stepped in and closed distance, an elbow finding ribs, a wrist turning without apology. The second man reached for a gun he could not fire without rewriting the evening news. Ji-woo saw the angle and hit the forearm. Clean, the way Tae-sik had taught him to hit when talking was over. The gun kissed the floor and decided to lie still. Elevator. So-ah breathed. They ran a line through the stacks to the service elevator in the back, the one that smelled like old paper and cleaner, and the inside of a lint trap. The doors slid half a second too slow. They slipped in as the corridor filled with men who thought they could outweight gravity. The elevator began to move. 2 floors down, it stopped. Someone had called it to the mezzanine. The panel light flickered like a nervous storyteller. When the doors opened, Chief Park stood there with the easy balance of a man who knows which way an argument will go. He smiled in a way that said he missed the old days when threats had poetry and now he had to speak in bullet points. Master Lee, Park said pleasantly. Miss Yoon, your father sends his regards. He tilted his head. Something in his earpiece crackled obediently. So-ah's jaw tightened a degree, which was the same as most people screaming. We have nothing you want, Ji-woo said. On the contrary, Park replied. You have exactly one thing Director Kang wants. The drive. He suggests you bring the key to the museum vault tonight. He also suggests you ask yourself whether loyalty is the same as love. He has my father, So-ah said. Not a question. Park's smile didn't change, which is how you know a man is telling the truth he has chosen. Warehouse by the river, maintenance pier B. Midnight. Come uninteresting. He stepped back. The doors closed without being asked, and the elevator resumed its descent, as if offended by the interruption. When they spilled into the staff corridor, Ji-woo inhaled the kind of air you only get in buildings that were designed to hold education and secrets. He felt the night rearranging itself into a shape that did not include him surviving by accident. My uncle is going to put a story on this, he said. Miss Yoon, the board. His phone lit with a message from a board member whose name smelled like cologne he disliked. Cut her loose. Optics. Let security handle it. Family first. He read it twice and didn't say it out loud. So-ah watched his face and not his mouth. You choose them. I go alone, she said. No plea in it, no dare. Just a weather report. He thought of Tae-sik's hand on his wrist, of his father's note, of signatures that meant different things depending on who wrote them. He put the phone face down on a table that had never held a weapon and said, I'm done outsourcing my survival. He looked at her. I choose you. Something uncoiled in her shoulders. Not relief. Exactly. Permission to proceed. Then we do it quiet, she said. Gala gives us cover. Cameras help you and hurt them. We go as if we belong. She looked at his suit, then his bandage, then his shoes. Which you do. Mostly. They left the library by a staff door and folded into the rain. In the car, So-ah mapped the museum in her head, and Ji-woo mapped the people in his. They built a plan out of overlapping maps. The way you build a bridge when both sides of the river are trying to move. By dusk, the museum wore light like jewelry. The gala turned the front steps into a lane of small crimes against subtlety. tuxedos that wanted applause, gowns with opinions. Ji-woo stepped onto the carpet and looked like a man who expected the city to adjust its brightness for him. So-ah moved along the edges as catering for 3 minutes, security for 5, no one for 7. She had a tray when eyes wanted a tray and a radio when ears wanted a voice. When their gazes met across the rotunda, a line connected them that only they could see. In the private wing, the vault lay under the domed gallery where the star map in the floor aligned with the ceiling. Ji-woo knelt and set the compass into its place. The ring nested in the bezel. So-ah counted stars under her breath like a child taught to sleep by constellations. "Turn on Aries," she said. "Then north isn't north. It's where the shadow points." He turned. Mechanisms woke beneath the stone with the sound of old clocks agreeing with each other. The seal released. The door didn't swing. It receded, like a secret reconsidering its options. Inside, nestled in velvet that pretended to be modest, a sealed drive waited without blinking. The room chilled. Not the air, his spine. "Hello, nephew," said Director Kang. The warmth in his tone an asset allocated elsewhere. Beside him, Chief Park stood with a posture that made the word loyalty feel oddly specific. And between them, bound but upright, Yoon So-ah breathed like a man who had decided pain would have to get in line. "Hand it over," Kang said. He didn't bother to pretend he meant the decoy. So-ah stepped forward with a drive in her palm. Head down, catering staff anonymous, even in a suit that fit better than the disguise allowed. Ji-woo felt the shape of the real drive in the hem of his jacket, where she had slid it a second earlier with a magician's confidence. "Careful," Park said. Because the line had to be said by someone, So-ah placed the drive in Kang's hand and looked up, her face empty of challenge. Kang smiled as if the city had been especially obedient tonight. Alarms didn't blare. That would be later. For now, the quiet thickened. Someone coughed in a gallery they would never see. "Midnight," Park said softly, as if reminding them of a dinner plan. Pier B. They walked out together like a family that had forgotten how to leave a room separately. On the far side of the wing, So-ah took Ji-woo by the elbow. "Rooftop," she breathed. "We don't take the front when the man who owns the front is the problem." They ran the staff stairs to the helipad. Rain sheeted sideways, making the city look like it had been drawn in pencil and smudged by a thumb. A red dot skipped across the vent housing and found So-ah's chest. Ji-woo stepped in front of it. Not entirely brave. Entirely decided. "Bad optics," he said, almost smiling, and felt her hand fold into his jacket. Not to pull him back, but to confirm the drive was still where she had put it. Somewhere below, a maintenance skiff coughed awake against the river. The wind pushed at them like a friend who knows you're about to do something stupid and is willing to help. They crouched behind the vent. Bullets pinged polite distances away. Breaths lined up without asking to. His phone vibrated in his pocket. One soft haptic. He glanced down without moving his head. A photo. Tae-sik, bound but alive. A caption, "Bring the key. Come alone." Another vibration. A second message from a different number with his family crest in the contact. "Security will extract you. Leave the girl." So-ah tugged his sleeve. "Ji-woo," she said quietly, and then looked not at him but at his jacket hem. Her fingers found a tiny hard point under the lining sewn, not taped. A second tracker. Not the one she had already stripped from his pocket at the substation. This one, older. This one, careful. She met his eyes and didn't blink. "Inside job," she said, voice almost lost to the rain. "Sewn into your suit." He felt the cold come from somewhere that wasn't weather. Not Park. Not Kang. Somewhere closer. Somewhere that calls you by your childhood nickname. The red dot wandered away, bored for a heartbeat. The river below waited like a line they would have to cross. "Who?" he asked. She didn't answer. She cut the tracker free with a pin she wasn't supposed to have and held it up between two fingers like a confession that hadn't learned it was one. The wind tried to take it. She let it. It sailed toward the far edge of the roof and vanished into rain. A false U leading them downriver. "Change of plan," she said. "Finally," he said, because being terrified is easier when it sounds like a joke. The rotor wash of a helicopter that didn't exist pushed the rain into new shapes. They ran for the maintenance ladder, as if the city had called their names and promised not to let them fall. Rain made the roof a drum and the city a rumor. They took the maintenance ladder, fast hands burning, boots sliding down into the building's ribs. Pipes ticked. Steam sighed. Somewhere above, a door banged open, and someone swore into a radio. So-ah led, one palm skimming the wall for tremors that meant people. Ji-woo followed. The compass caged in his fist like a pulse that wasn't his. A steel hatch gave to her shoulder. They spilled into a service corridor that smelled like oil and old decisions, then out to the loading dock where the river pressed its cold face against concrete. "Trust the second exit." Tae-sik's voice crackled from nowhere and everywhere. The calm in So-ah's ear catching a fragment like a bottle catching rain. "Skiff under pier. Don't be heroes. Be efficient." A maintenance skiff coughed awake below, the motor idling like a nervous throat. They climbed down a ladder slick with algae and a decade of neglect. So-ah untied the line. Ji-woo shoved off. Water shoved back. The city's lights broke themselves across the black. Only when the dock was an ink line behind them did the night allow a breath. "You're bleeding again," she said. "It's fashionable," he said. "Turn your arm." He did. She peeled back damp gauze, working by the skiff's single instrument glow. Her touch was careful, impatient, professional. He watched the way she did not waste motion, the way she leaned in just enough to see and exactly no more to be seen. Rain beaded on her lashes and didn't dare fall. "I meant what I said," he murmured. "Which part?" "I choose you." Her hands paused, then resumed. "Good," she said simply. "Because we still have to break your family open." They rode low along the pilings. Above them, the city argued with itself in sirens. So-ah pointed with her chin. The warehouse, a dark block at Pier B, windows lit with a false moon. Shadows paced past panes, like thoughts that didn't like the inside of their skulls. "Plan?" Ji-woo asked. "Give them what they can validate," she said. "Make them arrogant. Then trade up." "Arrogant is their native language, so speak it back," she said, and handed him a small flash puck. "On my cue." They tied off under the pier and climbed a rust ladder into the warehouse's shadow. So-ah first, then Ji-woo. Inside, the place had been cleaned for intimidation. Floor clear, sight lines long, a chair at center stage where Tae-sik sat bound but vertical. Director Kang liked theater. He stood at the far end in a dark suit that contained a smile the way a sheath contains a knife. Chief Park waited at his shoulder, still as a closed door, and between Kang and Park stood Secretary Min, family retainer. Schedule ghost. The woman who had taught Ji-woo which forks to ignore at age 6 and which donors never to shake hands with at age 16. She looked at him with the kindly eyes of a photograph and said in a voice that belonged to winter mornings, "Woo-ya. You should have called me. We would have made this gentle." So-ah didn't move, but the air around her cooled. Ji-woo's jaw made a decision his brain caught up to late. "The tracker," he said. Min smiled like a teacher pleased a student had remembered a vocabulary word. "Custom tailoring should include custom care," she said. "You've always been forgetful about your safety." Kang's hands applauded once without sound. "The drive," he said. "Let's stop pretending this is a negotiation." So-ah stepped out with a drive in her left hand and her right at her side where no one would see it make a fist. "You'll check it anyway," she said. "Let's not waste the rain." Park glided forward. So-ah met him halfway. Ji-woo felt the real drive in the hem of his jacket, like a small truth waiting to grow teeth. Park took the decoy, weighed it like a coin, handed it back to Kang. Kang slotted it into a reader on a rolling table someone had tastefully wheeled into place. Numbers bloomed on the screen. Names, routes. It looked convincing, because it was enough truth to hold a lie upright. Kang's face didn't change. That was how you knew he'd already decided to be pleased. "Untie him," he said. Park's men cut Tae-sik free and left the rope like an insult at his feet. So-ah's chin lifted a degree. Her eyes met Tae-sik's, a question passing fast and answered faster. He used his first free breath to say one word. "Now." So-ah palmed the flash puck and bounced it off the concrete at Kang's shoes. Light detonated without sound, white so bright it felt like heat. Park flinched. Min didn't, which told Ji-woo everything he needed to know about the rooms she had practiced in. "Move," So-ah breathed. They moved. Ji-woo yanked Tae-sik toward the side aisle. Park's men recovered quickly. The good ones always do. Bullets snapped needlessly into steel. So-ah kicked a pallet jack, sent it drifting across the floor like a polite animal. Two men tripped over its ankle and rediscovered gravity. Park stepped into their path, gun up, stance clean. Tae-sik stumbled. His leg decided pain was a bill to collect now. So-ah slid into Park's reach, jammed the slide, chopped at his wrist, rolled her shoulder, and took the gun without ceremony. Park smiled despite himself. Professionals recognize a sentence crafted well. Kang didn't run. Men like him never do. They let the room run for them. He reached for the reader to pocket it and found nothing. The cable dangled. The reader lay on its side. Power light dead So-ah's heel print across its plastic like a signature. "Going public," she said. "You can't outbid an audience." Kang's expression flickered, then learned new math. He nodded at Min. She stepped forward mildly, like bringing tea. A knife extended from her sleeve, as if it had always lived there. So-ah shifted to meet her. The two women closed in silence, no threats, no wasted syllables. Min cut like someone who had been paid to be invisible until necessary. So-ah parried like someone whose father had taught her to be necessary without being seen. Close, tight, hands, breath. Min's blade kissed So-ah's arm. So-ah returned the favor with Park's pistol not firing, just striking bone with the barrels flat like an exclamation mark without a vowel. Ji-woo pulled Tae-sik behind a column. The older man gripped his lapel, fingers iron. "End it," he whispered. "No more halls. No more doors." Ji-woo nodded. He looked at the compass. The ring nested in its bezel, like it had been waiting to be more than jewelry. He thought of the dome and the star map, of his father's handwriting the library had hidden for years. "Phones?" he asked. Tae-sik jerked his chin at a ceiling camera, the cheap kind that makes people behave. "They routed local feeds here," he said. "Park's men like mirrors, so we give them one." Ji-woo said, and took his phone out, as if it weighed less than it did. He opened the boardroom webcast app, the one for shareholder theater. He turned the camera on the warehouse and watched the viewer count tick from 2 to a small army. "Family first," he said softly, and pointed the lens at Kang. Park saw it first. His eyes cut to Kang. Min's blade hesitated a half-breath. That was enough. So-ah slid past, disarmed her with a motion so small it barely existed, then kicked the knife under a crate with surgical disrespect. Kang's smile failed. "Master Lee," he said, voice sugared for microphones. "What a pity to see you grandstand in the rain." The chat flooded. Names Ji-woo recognized, names he didn't. A director who had taught him golf etiquette typed, "This is illegal." A junior aide typed, "Is that park?" Oh my, and then nothing at all. Sirens found the pier at last. Late to the joke. Red and blue painted the warehouse in cheap patriotism. Park's men twitched toward exits that had been designed with them in mind. So-ah grabbed Ji-woo's hand and ran for the catwalk that cut along the wall to the river doors. Halfway up, a sniper dot stuttered on the railing and hopped to So-ah's chest again, greedy as memory. Ji-woo turned into it, body an answer he didn't have to think about. "Stop doing that," she hissed. "Learn to miss me," he said, smiling because his mouth didn't know how else to hold terror. They hit the river doors. Locked. So-ah braced her foot, jammed the crash bar with a pry from a fire hook, and the night fell in on them like a blessing with bad timing. Rain shoved at their faces. The river opened its arms like a terrible friend. Behind them, Park and Min crest the catwalk in a twin line of competence. In front, the pier. Slick and narrow. Below, the skiff waited, loyal and dumb. "Jump?" Ji-woo asked. "Landing's the hard part," she said, and looked at him in the way people look when they've decided to trust something outside the range of their experience. "On 3, he said. "We never say 3, she said. They jumped. The skiff smashed water flat and then forgot them, then remembered. They hit it hard enough to make future bruises. So-ah's shoulder barked. Ji-woo's ribs replied. The river closed over their heads to see what they tasted like. He came up first, hand sweeping for her. She surfaced at his palm like the answer to a question he'd been writing since childhood. He hauled her in. They both coughed the city out. Bullets slapped the water uselessly. The skiff lurched away as if embarrassed. Ji-woo gunned it into the dark underbelly of the bridge, into a shadow that knew how to keep a secret. They didn't speak for a long minute. The rain filled the silence like confident applause. At last, she turned his face toward hers with 2 fingers, checking pupils like a medic, then checking something else like a person. Their foreheads touched for a beat that could have been a kiss and wasn't yet. "If this changes everything," she breathed. "Let it change toward us," he said. Her mouth softened against his. Brief and certain and human in a night that had tried so hard to be about metal. They broke apart at the same second, practical returning like shoes after dancing. "Tomorrow," she said, voice steady. "We ended in daylight. Cameras, board, press. Your father's note, the ledger, the vault footage. All of it. Family first," he said again, and tasted what the words felt like when they belonged to him. A police launch screamed by above their shadow, chasing the ghost of a tracker that was already halfway downriver. Park would realize. Min would adjust. Kang would smile for the papers. So-ah wrapped her hand over his on the throttle. Added weight. "Don't blink," she said. "Can't," he said. "I might miss us." They aimed the bow at morning. The compass needle quivered, then settled not north, but the direction a shadow points when the sun finally shows up. Behind them, the warehouse filled with people who had mistaken control for certainty. Ahead, a bridge arched like a question mark that had decided to forgive its sentence. They didn't slow. Morning didn't arrive. It unfolded slow, colorless. The river, a long exhale under a sky that hadn't decided if it would forgive the night. They hid the skiff under a bridge and walked the last blocks on foot, wet hair combed by the wind. So-ah texted 3 numbers that had never been in her phone and always in her head. Ji-woo opened an email to the board and another to the press and attached a truth that didn't like living in files. He scheduled both with a thumb that didn't shake. "Daylight," she said. "Cameras," he said. They chose a public place with nowhere to stage a tragedy. The riverside promenade by the stone steps where office workers bought fish cakes and old men argued with pigeons. No van could lurch without a dozen lenses deciding to be journalists. Rain practiced patience above the skyline and held. The air full of the sound a storm makes when it thinks. Kang arrived with the confidence of a man who believes daytime belongs to him. Chief Park flanked, immaculate in a suit that had never met a wrinkle it didn't conquer. Secretary Min walked a half-step behind, umbrella tilted like a crown that had taken a vow of subtlety. Two men shepherded Tae-sik between them, wrists cuffed in front, as if politeness could rebrand cruelty. "Woo-ya," Min said gently, as if greeting him at a breakfast he'd missed. "You look tired. People make poor decisions when the sky is the wrong color." "Let's change it," Ji-woo said. So-ah placed a drive on the stone rail, not quite within reach. She stood with her shoulders square to the river and her eyes square to Park's weapon hand. Tae-sik looked at his daughter and said nothing. Their silence spoke like a dialect only two people ever learn. "Here's how this works," Kang said, smiling for a drone that had decided they were a story. "The ledger comes to me. Mr. Yoon walks away. You give up your childish broadcast tricks and return to the business of being a figurehead." Ji-woo lifted his phone and opened the boardroom webcast again, the one he'd pointed at the warehouse. Viewers accumulated the way raindrops gather at an eave. His face filled the tiny screen and 100 others. He did not clear his throat. "I'm done being silent," he said. And it was almost a whisper. "I'm done calling theft strategy and fear stability." Director Kang. He tilted the camera slightly until it framed Kang and Park and Min and the river and the drive and Tae-sik in one quiet shot. "This is you. This is us seeing you." Kang's smile held for 3 heartbeats too many and then learned new arithmetic. Park's eyes emptied. Min's fingers tightened on the umbrella the way a pianist readies a chord. So-ah exhaled. "You'll check the drive," she said to Park, as if discussing a receipt. "You should. It's only polite." Park gestured, and one of his men stepped forward. So-ah flicked her gaze at Tae-sik's cuffs. His hands turned a centimeter, a private signal. When the man reached, So-ah slid the drive closer with 2 fingers and stepped back just enough to make a shape that read as unthreatening to amateurs and exactly wrong to professionals. The man lifted the drive. Kang nodded. Park looked at Ji-woo. Then So-ah. Then the live viewer count ticking up like a fever. Min spoke without moving her mouth. "Woo you," she murmured, voice barely wind. "You don't want to spend the rest of your life in meetings about consequences." "I want to spend it with my windows open," he said. Sirens did not scream. They came slow, the way rules walk toward money. 2 patrol cars rolled up to the promenade but didn't bleed lights. Plainclothes stepped out, observing, unsure which version of reality would make it to their paperwork. "Untie him," Kang said softly, too late even for his own story. Park cut the cuffs. Tae-sik's wrists remembered blood with relief that didn't show on his face. "Walk," Park told him. Tae-sik did not. He stood. He looked at his daughter and let pride be a thing that didn't need words. Then, he glanced at Ji-woo's phone. At the red live marker, at the world watching. "Say it now," he told Ji-woo. "Finish." Ji-woo did. He tapped send on a scheduled drop, a packet labeled for the board, the auditor who'd been demoted for honesty, a pair of reporters who still liked verbs. In 100 inboxes, the ledger woke up and told the same story with the same numbers and the same ugly breakfast of names and dates and routes. In some of those inboxes, people who had never said no to a family member said "oh" out loud. Kang moved first, not physically. With his face, he put on the expression a man uses when he has decided reality needs a facelift. "Master Lee has been unwell," he told the nearest camera. "These are deepfakes. A family matter. We will handle it internally." Ferg. Min lifted her umbrella for him against a rain that still hadn't fallen. She turned it, delicate, the way you turn a ring when you are buying time. The umbrella slid not to Kang, but between Kang and the nearest exit. "Enough," she said. The word was soft, and it was a cliff. She set the umbrella down. Beneath her blouse, where a microphone might be, the plainclothes cop nearest her heard what he needed to hear and lifted his chin. Two officers approached Kang with the choreography of men who know a suit can bruise. Park stepped into the space between, gun half drawn. So-ah was already moving. She closed, inside his line, jammed the slide, turned his wrist. He didn't fall. He's too proud for that. He planted his feet and reached for a second weapon a man like him pretends not to carry. Tae-sik met him in the middle, no flourish, no speech, a neat disarm that ended with Park's forearm across a stone bollard and a final clean lock. Park grunted. His fingers released the idea of a gun. "Chief Park," Tae-sik said, and his tone was the weight of 2 decades of unlearned humility. "Loyalty isn't a place to hide." Cuffs clicked. Not loud. The sound you hear when a door decides it's time to be honest. Kang turned, as if a better option might exist in his periphery. Min's hand was already out, palm up. He looked at it, like a man looking at rain he can't purchase. He placed his phone in it, and then, after a heartbeat, his wrists. The cops took him away through a maze of cameras. Some mercy exists, even for villains. The lens framed him waist up. Silence arrived, but the internet didn't. Notifications bloomed on Ji-woo's screen. Directors resigning via statement. A compliance officer sending receipts. An apology from someone who'd never apologized for anything except running out of the rare tea in the conference room. He turned the phone face down on the rail and looked at the 3 people who would still be there when the feed ended. Tae-sik flexed his hands. Then his jaw. "I resign," he said. "No," Ji-woo answered. The word clean. "Stay. I need someone in the room who doesn't mistake quiet for consent." Tae-sik studied him as if measuring a doorframe. Then he nodded once. The way you nod at furniture that will carry weight. People drifted back to their afternoons. Rain tried a few drops, liked the taste of the promenade, and began in earnest. So-ah opened the black umbrella she'd carried since childhood because her father had always said you don't wait for the sky to love you. You prepare to love it anyway. She lifted it over Ji-woo without ceremony, and they stepped under the small circle together. "Family first," he said. "Not to test it, to keep it." "Define family," she said. He took the signet ring off his finger heavy, inherited, a symbol that had advertised the wrong virtues. He slipped it onto the compass chain and let the two hang together, not as metal, but as meaning. Then he set the chain in her hand. "Not a proposal," he said. "A promise, to aim by where the shadow points when the sun is honest." She watched the ring settle against the compass, the way it made the old brass look like it had been waiting for company. Her hand closed around it. The umbrella shook as the rain thickened. "This doesn't make me yours," she said. "It makes me accountable," he said. "To you. To him. To the girl who didn't ask to be brave this year and did it anyway." "Hana?" she asked, surprised at the sound of the name in this story. "All the Hanas," he said. "Yours. Mine. The ones who buy fish cakes and grow up under bad weather and need the stone steps to be safe." She laughed, a quiet thing that lived under the drum of the storm. "You talk pretty when you're wet. You fight pretty when you're furious," he said. They stopped walking because the bridge asked them to. Stone held 1,000 reflections, umbrellas, sky. Their faces made impressionist by rain. So-ah leaned in. The kiss was not cinematic. It was practical, shared under a too small roof. A promise eked out between the sound of sirens receding and the sound of the river remembering how to breathe. When they parted, she tucked the chain into her coat and looked at him like a plan that had found its spine. "What now?" she asked. "Board vote," he said. Public audit. New security with fewer mirrors. A museum that belongs to the city more than my PR team. Lunch and my father, she said. Desk by my door, he said, and a raise I can't afford and will. Tasik, who had professionally pretended not to hear, cleared his throat like a man who suddenly owned the luxury of embarrassment. Fish cakes, he said. Before meetings, make us forget we eat. They bought 3. The vendor winked at So-ah like he knew a plot when he saw one and handed Jiwoo an extra skewer as tax for being obviously in love. They ate on the steps with the umbrella low or not at all and the rain blurring the world into a kinder draft. By afternoon, a press conference happened without them. Lawyers wrote sentences like ladders. The board issued a statement about values they planned to remember. Jiwoo did not attend. He sat in his father's study with the window open and the ledger on the desk and the compass quiet at last. He signed papers that moved weight from wrong shelves to right ones. He made calls that hurt and calls that healed. At dusk, he walked to the stone bridge where the city offered itself in lights and exhaust and possibility. So-ah waited, already under the umbrella. The rain had become the soft kind that launders days into being bearable. I found something, she said, and took his hand and pressed a photo into it, a kid Jiwoo with a gap-toothed smile and a compass too big for his palm. Taesik behind him, one hand on his shoulder, So-ah blurry at the edge because some stories were already in the corners of other stories. You'll never not have to fight, she said. I'd rather fight while walking home with you, he said. She tilted the umbrella so the rain made a smaller room around their shoulders. They crossed the bridge. Their reflections touched and didn't mind who saw. Behind them, the city decided to keep its lights on a little longer, and somewhere in the dark, a compass didn't point north. It pointed toward 2 people choosing, which is the only direction that has ever mattered.